Hey, Brooke.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
Yeah, somehow I
Great.
was,
Thanks for joining us. Oh, no, you're great. Thanks for joining us. Um, well, great. I think we're all here. So we'll get started. And it's wonderful to see everybody today. Nice spring day out. Little humid, but thanks everybody so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Delegate Learman, and I represent, along with my teammate, Senate President Bill Ferguson and delegates Luke Klippinger and Robin Lewis, the 46th District in Baltimore City, although of course we work at the state level to pass and implement policies that affect the entire state. And today we are going to talk about an issue that affects the entire state, rural or urban, suburban or not. The issue of affordable housing is one that was, the challenge of affordable housing was with us before COVID, it is with us now, and it will be with us afterwards. So I'm thrilled to have a great panel today to talk about this important issue. Before we begin, I just want to make a few points. Being elected official is really about more than passing legislation. I'm sure the county exec would agree. It's about connecting people with the resources that they need, driving discussion about important topics, advocating for change in multiple ways, including through discussions like this one. And for those of us who believe that government is fundamentally about reducing barriers to success, creating opportunity, this pandemic has really crystallized and highlighted the inequality in our society. I saw a bumper sticker, or maybe it was a sign, and I've gravitated to it because I think it's so true. It said, "We are all in the same storm right now, but we are not all in the same boat." Many of us are in very weathered and old boats. Many of our boats don't have roofs. And we are really fortunate today, the four of us, to be sitting in our homes, our offices, safe and sound. But on the front lines, we know are our farm workers, our transit workers, our state employees, our grocery store clerks who are really keeping things running and who often can't really afford where they live, whether it's a mortgage payment or rent. There's challenges. So as June 1 approaches, hundreds of thousands of Marylanders are wondering how they're going to pay rent or how they're going to pay a mortgage. We've received calls and emails. I know the county executive has. And there was, of course, an affordable housing crisis before COVID-19, and the economic impact of COVID will undoubtedly and has already made it worse. So I'm a member of the Joint Committee to End Homelessness in Maryland, and so I've taken a deep dive into the issues of affordable housing, housing discrimination, homelessness, and more, and was thrilled this year to follow the county exec's lead and work with Senator Will Smith and pass the statewide HOME Act. So that finally, after 23 years of trying, we are a state now that prohibits discrimination against people simply based on their source of income. And that's a great step, but in the grand scheme of things, it's also small because there's so much more to do. So I'm so honored and just thrilled to have an amazing panel with me here today to talk about their thoughts, to share their insights, their ideas, and their thoughts on how we can confront the challenge of affordable housing for Marylanders. So I want to turn it over first to our Anne Arundel County Exec, Stuart Pittman, who has really been a leader on affordable housing issues, one of the leaders in the state on these issues. He understands these issues, and he was elected as Anne Arundel County Executive after his first campaign for public office in 2018. Prior to this, he coordinated national programs for the National Low Income Housing Coalition and the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, before starting his own business as a farmer and horse trainer, which I think is so fantastic. His philosophy of government is conservative and progressive. As a farmer, he worked hard against onerous regulations that had no public benefit and promoted policies to make the industry commercially viable. And as director of the Anne Arundel County Soil Conservation District, he understands and pushed for compliance with erosion and sediment control standards to protect local waterways. So he really understands how to put communities first and how we can make sure that government is helping our businesses, helping residents to be stronger. So County Exec, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started. Thank you so much for being here today, and really looking forward to hearing from you, hearing about the work that you've done so far and what you see going forward that we need to do. So welcome.
Thank you, Delegate Lehrman. Can I call you Brooke?
Yes, please.
It's hard to be formal in these Zoom meetings, it's just not
this is my like little basement that you see.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm one of your big fans and
Thanks.
follow the stuff that you're doing and the legislation that you've been pushing. And I'm so glad that you're doing this. I looked at the picture that you put up there with the flyer with all of us, and my hair was a whole lot shorter at that point. And
Yes.
I'm looking forward. In our county, barbershops are going to be open on Monday, and I'm going to be there
Nice.
in line outside.
Nice.
To get
Yes.
my first haircut in a long time. Yeah, the housing issue is one of, I think, many things where we had major problems in this country, in this state and county that a lot of us knew about. The people who are experiencing them certainly knew about. And now the people who have been living basically paycheck to paycheck, maybe having a month's savings, it's a really scary moment. And so it's fortunate. I was really worried, actually, that the CARES Act, the funding from the federal government would come out, and that it would be all trickle down theory stimulus, where all the money would go to the very top, and with the hope that it trickles down and benefits the people who need it. And that's the way things have been going for the last 40 years or so. So the fact that it had unemployment insurance for people who don't normally qualify was great. And then the fact that in the Senate, our senators actually worked really hard, Cardin and Van Hollen, to get local support in there, to get some funding for local governments. And that was really important because some of our local governments actually do want to get the money out into the streets where it's needed the most. And so one of the first things, $101 million is going to Anne Arundel County. It's based on population. And I sat down with our Health and Human Services team, and we were very clear that most of that money should go for things like eviction prevention, rental assistance, and direct payments to what I call excluded workers who don't qualify for whatever reason for any kind of federal assistance, and feeding people. So that's what we're able to do, and there's some flexibility in that. So we were able to put together an eviction prevention program. And how do you want me to just keep going on, or do you want to ask me questions?
Well, no, tell us a little bit about the eviction protection program and how you decided to do that work. I mean, I got to give a shout out to my constituent, Erin Karpowitz, who at AACDS and her work in Anne Arundel County. But tell us a little bit about how that was received, how quickly the money was spent, how it went. I'm curious to hear, how successful it was, or how you perceived how successful it was.
Yeah, well, it's still just getting started. It's underway, but I think we're all aware that the governor did put in place a ban on evictions that's in place now. So landlords are not supposed to be evicting people when they can't pay their rent. And I believe that in most cases they're not, but we know that that's going to get lifted. And so we wanted to get the program in place, and our team at Community Development Services, Aaron and her boss, Kathy Koch, and all of them put this together. And I think they were smart about how they're doing it. It's for folks who have been making below 80% of median income, and they're actually in the process of lowering that to make sure that the people who need it most can get it. And it gets people in the door. So not only are we providing some assistance, the money goes actually directly to the landlord, but they have to show that they're being threatened with eviction and that they have lost income. And what our team does is work with the tenant. So it's really counseling on the whole big picture of how you're going to get out of this situation. And so it's very labor intensive, the way that we're doing it. And we had, of course, lots of applications come in very quickly. We started out with $1 million before we even had our CARES money. We took some of our casino revenue.
Oh, nice.
We also had some funds that I had put in the budget last year for rental assistance, and the program was about to get started. And so we put that $500,000 in. So those two $500,000 were our first $1 million. And then we saw what the demand was, and we threw another $3 million in for now from the CARES money. So that's $4 million. We've had 776 calls from people to access it, and it's taking time to process them. The intent wasn't to get all the money out the door right away because we wanted to wait until it was really needed, but to have the
Right.
cases ready to go. So while some money has gone out, most of it we're holding. And the fact that we have these people doing the counseling is really important. And I've been a little bit surprised that the state has not stepped up and done anything.
Yeah.
I know that during the last recession, the O'Malley administration was doing a lot through the housing and community development, counseling work and assistance for people who were, risking at just on the edge of becoming homeless. And I've asked the governor about that directly on a call. Others have asked. Organizations, as you know, have sent letters pressuring the governor to do this. And so far it's been silence. But the state has to play a role in this. But if they don't, we have to step up and do the work.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it has been frustrating. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's been dispiriting to see DHCD and the governor not sort of do a more holistic rental assistance program, especially because some of the money that the state is getting from the Federal CARES Act is basically unrestricted. And so they could use some of that for rental assistance. And I think it's important to note, you said this, but I want to highlight it, that when you apply for this rental assistance program, that money is going to the landlord, right? And so sometimes I think people have tried to drive a wedge between, well, you just care about the renter, but really when you care about the renter, you care about the landlord, because if the renter isn't paying rent, then the landlord's not making money to pay the mortgage, right? And so it's real, you can't separate them in some ways. It's all about, because it's one system. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when you think about housing and affordable housing, you think about the providers of it are for-profit, some of them are nonprofit, and then there's public housing that's completely government owned. And if you don't keep the building up and you don't have that, the revenues to be able to make the repairs and do all of that, and to pay off the mortgage, then you don't have the housing. So it's all one big package. And I think it was a good move to have the money go directly to the landlords, so that it doesn't show up in people's tax returns as income.
Right. Yep.
It's whether you're documented or undocumented, none of that is an issue at that point. It's really just keeping the machine going so that there is housing.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And one person asked, and there are a couple of questions about how do people enter the program for the rental assistance? And yours was really the first out of the gate. And I know that Kathy and Aaron and their team put a lot of thought into this, but curious, how do you show evidence of potential eviction, since evictions are not allowed right now? What sort of, how are folks entering the program? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they actually can get to it directly through ACDS by calling them, but they also were careful. They have some partners that may have been working with some of those folks in the past. So you can come through our Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. You can come through our Community Action Agency, and you can come through Lighthouse Shelter, or straight to ACDS. You end up in the same place with the same counselors, but they'll walk you through the first part of the process, and that might help in some cases with some of the trust issues. And the by having these counselors doing the program, they're being very I hope they're being very flexible about documentation. Just come up with some documentation. One of the things that's been difficult is that requiring in order to send the check to the landlord has to have a tax ID number or a social security number to do a W-9.
Right.
And there are cases where people are subleasing, or it's a small home and the landlord might not be documented and have that. So in a few cases that's been an issue, but otherwise they just need to have something to show that you had income, a pay stub, a bank statement, that kind of thing. And then, a letter something from the landlord. And the landlords actually, one of the interesting things was that the larger landlords that were really on top of things found out about this right away. And they sent out notices to their tenants and said, call this number.
Yeah, yeah, get some money. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, as they should, right? I mean, if you're a landlord and you know you have tenants who are out of work or anything, like take advantage of the program for sure.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what it's there for. No, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Charisse now at the Public Justice Center to talk a little bit about how the PJC, what the PJC is hearing about and their ideas to confront some of the challenges that we're facing in the affordable housing space. So did you want me to share the PowerPoint you had, Charisse, or?
We can, or I can speak. It's totally up.
Okay, I have it, so I'm happy to share it if you want. Let's see.
Well, first, hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for giving me a chance an opportunity to share what's going on in Baltimore. And also, I am really happy to hear what Anne Arundel County is doing and kind of paving a way for us to follow. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you. We have at the Public Justice Center and Baltimore Renters United, we were working on this before COVID for quite a while, but it became a focal point once COVID hit, and COVID just exacerbated all of our housing issues, other issues as well, but our housing issues. So the right to counsel in Baltimore for the civil rights of eviction in the wake of COVID-19. You can change the slide. So I'm just going to give a little scope, and I'm going to be as quick as possible. This is a long PowerPoint, but I will be as quick as possible, and you guys can get a copy of the PowerPoint. You can get copies of the reports that I'm referencing, and of course, any questions, you can contact the Public Justice Center, me, Charisse Liu, or Baltimore Renters United.
Great. Yeah, and absolutely. We will send out a copy of this PowerPoint to everybody who registered for this. So we'll get through it. Yep.
So just to provide a scope of what Baltimore was pre-COVID. We don't have information right now about COVID, but pre-COVID, Baltimore evictions rate was at 5.3%, which is about 2.5% more than the national average. Mm-hmm. Eviction is a civil rights issue and an equity issue. The number of evictions of Black women compared to white males is 296% more, or 3.9 times higher than white males. Dr. Tim Thomas has said that racial disparity makes eviction a civil rights issue linked to the legacy of segregation and housing practices directed against persons of color. 7.3% of all Black male-headed households and 5.4% of all Black female-headed households were removed from their homes. These rates are roughly 51% and 11% higher than the white male-headed eviction rate. Next slide, please. This is a slide from Dr. Tim Thomas that actually maps out the evictions, and it falls right in line with the segregated neighborhoods to the west and in the gentrifying neighborhoods to the east. And it falls right in line with Baltimore's very familiar or infamous black butterfly.
Yep.
Next. So now we're in this crisis, the COVID crisis. And Maryland's moving towards 25% unemployment, 20% delinquency rate for April's rent, with no clear additional relief from the federal government or the state. We knew before now that eviction is a public health issue. But now we can't overstate that it is a public health issue, and the state and the city will not recover if we have a mass wave of evictions.
Certainly. Yep.
So we did a study, the Stout study. This has been done in other states, jurisdictions, and cities. And they estimate that with a $5.7 million investment, the city and state combined would save $35.6 million. So if we provide the right to counsel for people 50% of the median income in Baltimore City, it would cost $5.7 million, but save or avoid the cost of $35.6 million between the state and the city. $7.7 million in foster care spending. There are many kids that end up in foster care and cannot return home due to an eviction and the effects from that.
Mhm.
$12.5 million in Medicaid spending on emergency room and inpatient care. $2.4 million in cost to Baltimore City schools transporting homeless students. $2.3 million state funding lost to Baltimore cities because of chronically absent homeless students due to eviction. $10.6 million for the disabled and providing shelter, transitional housing, and health institution housing. You can skip over this one.
You want me to just go through these ones, or do you want?
That's one. Yeah.
Okay.
So for every dollar spent on the right to counsel, you avoid Maryland and Baltimore City avoids $6.24, 624%. Cost avoidance to the city is 17.5 million. Cost avoidance to Maryland is 18.1 million. And the expected people, the amount of households that would avoid disruptive displacement is 5,777. 17,300 individuals. This dramatic slide shows how much representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
About 80% of the tenants have a legal defense. 8% get to actually raise those defenses. The percent of landlords with representation in Baltimore is 96%, while it's only 1% for tenants in Baltimore City.
Fascinating. Wow.
92% of tenants with representation avoid disruptive displacement. Legal counsel holds landlords accountable to comply to new laws around COVID-19 and habitability laws. The right to counsel has been proven effective in other jurisdictions, San Francisco, New York. New York was the first ones to come out of the gate with it. Evictions dropped 29% in zip codes with the right to counsel in New York. That is double the amount of zip codes that did not have the right to counsel. 84% of the individuals represented or the households represented remained in their homes. These are the other cities and jurisdictions and states that are considering or have enacted the right to counsel.
Quite a few.
Quite a few. How do we pay for this? An immediate down payment from the CARES Act, the 13 million CDBG funds. The money will go to rental assistance and some legal representation. At this time, it is important to have legal representation to make sure that landlords and tenants are coming up with agreements to make sure that their rights are asserted. Legislation at city level to create the right. And then again, legislation at the state level to provide a portion of the funding for local jurisdictions that choose to adopt a right to counsel.
Interesting. So talking about other jurisdictions being able to do it too. That's interesting. And this report was just released last week or the week before?
These weeks are blending together, but
I know they are. They are.
Both of them, there were two reports. I should have made that clear. Dr. Tim Thomas from the University of California, Berkeley, he studied who was being evicted, what neighborhoods, what areas, what were the demographics.
Okay.
And Stout, who has done this in multiple jurisdictions as well as Dr. Thomas, they studied what are the costs. And mind you, the costs that we show here are only some of the areas that we were able to identify. And it obviously doesn't show the personal cost. It doesn't show how many people lose their jobs and the spiral into even more poverty. It doesn't show certain areas that we weren't able, because of lack of resources of ours, to gain and report and get these resources to let you, to show the connection. These were the
Right.
ones that were available.
Right. This is interesting. Thank you. I'm glad, very timely that the report just was released last week or the week before. So great to have you on to talk about this. I think one of the interesting things is there are these different ways to spend some of the CARES money. But of course, at the end of the day, we need the federal government to provide additional funding to local and state government too, to do more of this work. So thank you, Charisse. That was great. And we'll certainly share the slides with everybody who's on. Now I'm delighted to turn it over to Dan Pontius. Dan's the Housing Policy Coordinator at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. He has more than 20 years of public policy and nonprofit organizational leadership experience. And Dan's going to talk to us a little bit about, Dan, I know you helped work on a letter to the governor, doing exactly what County Executive Pittman talked about early, which was encouraging DHCD to create a rental support program. And of course, the BMC is the Council of Governments that represents, Central Maryland government, local governments. So talk to us about, some of what the BMC and their attendant local governments is advocating for, sort of systemic challenges it sees regionally, and what you all are working on. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you very much. And is my sound coming through okay? Is that?
Sound great.
Okay, great. All right, well, yeah, this is, just to follow up on what County Executive Pittman and Charisse have been saying, we kind of coordinate local governments in the Baltimore area, and actually this all ties together. Aaron Karpowitz, who you've mentioned, chairs our housing committee, our fair housing group, and our housing committee, which really brings together local governments, public housing authorities, state agencies, and private sector stakeholders too. And for the last 8 years, it's really been helping us, advise us on mostly carrying out our fair housing responsibilities, which is my main role at BMC, is helping local governments carry out their fair housing responsibilities. But as this was hitting in March, we devoted our April 1st housing committee meeting to just discussing, what people are seeing in terms of protecting their residents. And really this need for rental assistance really came out as a huge theme. And so we took the next week, and Aaron in Anne Arundel County and Peter Engel in Howard County took the lead on putting this letter together, asking Secretary Holt at the State Department of Housing to set up a statewide rental assistance program. Because obviously in this time, people being thrown out of their homes is even more of a public health problem than it already is. They're either doubling up with other relatives or friends, or out on the streets. But then there's also this other problem too, where if tenants aren't able to pay their rent, then maybe the landlord can't pay their mortgage. And we know from the last recession that lots of properties ending up in the hands of banks is not good for neighborhoods. It's not good for our economy. And so that was our pitch. And we've been in touch with the state, talking with them about how they could help. But as local government is really where the rubber hits the road. We gotta You got to pick up the trash. You got to fill the potholes.
Yep.
You got to make this work. So that's why you see, and I think County Executive Pittman has really been in the lead regionally and statewide. And Anne Arundel County was the first out of the gate. They've been learning a lot, and we've been. I know the other local jurisdictions have really appreciated hearing from Aaron and Kathy as they work to roll out their programs. Hartford County actually already has a program of their own online too. You can apply for it on their website right now. And then Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard County are all working on kind of nailing down their own programs. They've used local funds as Anne Arundel County has, CDBG funds. And like Anne Arundel County, I know Baltimore County is planning to use some of its coronavirus relief funds, which is, as County Executive Pittman said, is a really key pot of funds to devote to this. So those programs are rolling out. We're really seeing the need for this. I mean, I'm going to draw from some information we got from Anne Arundel County. I mean, everyone knows the process of applying for unemployment insurance is not seamless right now. I mean, the demand is just so huge that the delays are inevitable. And so, but what Anne Arundel County is seeing is that people are, little things are tripping up their applications. Even if they've been approved, they probably haven't gotten their benefits. And then in many cases, there's been some glitch, somebody worked as a dental hygienist as a contractor and then recently was switched to an employee. And so then that messed up the application. And so then that takes more time. So, and rent is, I mean, it's nice not being able to be thrown out of your house, but there are other expenses too. So I
Certainly.
think we're finding that these local programs are really filling a critical need right now. And I know it's my hope that, you know, I think we're seeing through this crisis that government at all levels, local, state, federal government, you know, competent government is just more critical than ever. It's just irreplaceable right
Yep.
now.
And what are you hearing, if anything, from landlords and MMHA and others about, you know, rates of evictions or attempted eviction or rate of non-payment or anything? Are you hearing at all? Any statistics or information on that that could be helpful?
Yeah, we are. I mean, and Ivy can probably speak to this as well.
Sure.
But what we're hearing is sort of a gradual increase in non-payment of rent. I think you know, we are seeing, and you know, there's the one-time CARES Act payments that people have gotten, so they may be using that. You know, so that most people are still paying rent. You know, like but there does seem to be kind of a creeping problem of non-payment of rent. I think a lot of property owners are also working with tenants on payment plans, you know, because it's in everybody's interest to do that. But there is sort of this concern, and kind of like the coronavirus itself, you know, once you see a problem, you're already 2 weeks behind, you know, addressing it, you know. So so I think we want to head off a problem rather than, you know, see a whole bunch of
There's a good question that maybe you could address before I turn it over to Ivy. And is there any coordination, or what is the BMC's role in sort of coordinating local programs, at least from a communication standpoint, you know, and demonstrating how they're working? You know, is there any coordination to say, well, you know, in Anne Arundel County, you can get it if, you know, here are the requirements, in Baltimore City, here are the requirements. Are they all totally different, or are they pretty much following the Anne Arundel County mold and building off of that, or what are you seeing?
Well, I know I mean, our main value, I think, in the region is facilitating communication among the jurisdictions. So we had a call with Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County, where I know Michael Braverman and Terry Hickey were really picking Aaron and Kathy's brain on what, you know, so I think everyone's looking to Anne Arundel for guidance and experience for how they set up their program. So we're definitely doing that. We still have our housing committee that meets monthly. That's a forum for exchanging information, not just among local governments, but with state agencies and private stakeholders too. So that has been our main forum. We do try to highlight success stories. We put a post on our letter on our website. So if you go to our website, it's a little down now because it was April 8th, but if you look at all the news posts, you can actually find our little news item on that and read the letter yourself. So we are doing things to kind of highlight success stories in local government and to facilitate communication so that we can do the best we can, you know, so that not every jurisdiction has to learn it on their own like Anne Arundel did. You know, we can make things better as we go along.
And then you did mention the coronavirus relief funds, and for everybody, not everybody may know what that means. Could you just briefly mention, I know the county executive mentioned them as well. Could you talk a little bit about where those funds, you know, those funds are from the CARES Act, but could you talk a little bit about them and how they could be used for this?
Sure. Well, my understanding is they're very flexible, as County Executive Pittman said. So I think it's $150 billion nationally. So Maryland's share of that is $2.3 billion. 101 million went to Anne Arundel. You know, so about 1 billion gets shared among the local governments of the state. But that still leaves $1.3 billion that is at the state's discretion on how to spend. And so that's, you know, when we did our April 8th letter, that was kind of a pitch that this would be a good use for the, you know, local governments are doing what they can, but our resources are kind of limited. Charisse mentioned how the city is devoting $13 million in CDBG money. They get a significantly larger share of CDBG funds. But, you know, other jurisdictions don't get nearly as much. And so it would really be helpful to have the state supporting the local governments as we're kind of out there trying to help, you know, address this on the ground.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And congratulations on your son's recent graduation from college.
Thanks.
And now, yes, exactly. And now I'm so excited to turn it over to Ivy Dench-Carter. Ivy is the Regional Vice President of Penrose. She's responsible for all phases of Penrose's development projects in Maryland, Virginia, and the Virgin Islands and Washington, D.C. She brings 30 years of management and real estate development experience. And I think it's really important that we include the voices of the people who are actually developing and building affordable housing in these discussions about, affordable housing is a huge topic, and we're talking about rental support and we're talking about evictions, but we also just need to be building more affordable housing in the state of Maryland. And so that has to be a part of the conversation. And so Ivy, I'm thrilled you could join us today. And, would love to hear a little bit from you on what you see as some of the long-term challenges of building more affordable housing, and whether this pandemic is exacerbating some of that because of bond sale issues, or and any possible solutions that you see.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Delegate Learman. I'd also like to give a shout out to County Exec Pittman.
Yes.
We were so excited in the affordable housing community when you became the county executive for Anne Arundel County. It's great what you and your staff are doing to enable us to develop, to continue to develop and do more affordable housing in the county. I want to talk about first how the pandemic is affecting landlords in the affordable housing industry. And even before the pandemic hit, there was already a severe shortage of affordable housing, not only in Maryland, but across the country. For us as landlords, unlike public perception, all of our residents do not receive public assistance or rent subsidies. In Penrose's Maryland portfolio, we have approximately 30 to 40% of our families, seniors, and persons with disabilities have some type of rental assistance. So the great majority of our residents are not receiving rent subsidy, and as a result, they are being furloughed from their jobs. They've not been able to get unemployment assistance or not qualifying for unemployment assistance. It's a huge issue for us from a landlord perspective. Fortunately, we are socially conscious and we care about our residents. It does not benefit us as a company to evict our residents. We want to make sure that they can stay in place and that they're getting the services that they need. We also consider our residents the second tier of folks on the front line. They're the ones who are working in the hospitals at lower level jobs, in the nursing home facilities, in the assisted living facilities, at grocery stores. I mean, they are out there with the public, and every day they are risking their families to be exposed to COVID-19. And we need to really understand and appreciate what many of those families are going through. When the mandate came down that all evictions were being held, landlords, naturally, we were shaking our boots. We're like, oh no, how is this going to affect us from a financial perspective to maintain our properties? We still have to pay the light bill. We still have to pay the water sewer bill. We still have to maintain our units. We've experienced additional costs to make sure that our common areas are being sanitized appropriately and there's social distancing and safety protocols put in place for our managers and our maintenance staff. We're still open for business.
Right.
And we appreciate the fact that our staff has to be out there on the front lines as well. In most cases, the public perception, affordable housing developments are not cash cows. We operate on very, very slim margins. And so not getting rent, or some people will ask, well, aren't you participating in the forbearance program that was put out for Freddie and Fannie loans? Well, most of our developments don't have a Freddie or Fannie loan. And at the end of the day, you still have to repay those months of the mortgages that are being delayed. And realistically, can socially conscious landlords expect that residents are going to be able to come up with 2, 3, 4, 5 months of back rent to help pay for those delayed mortgage expenses. It's not realistic.
Yep.
And, so, it's, even though that was put out there, it's not really helping us from an affordable housing perspective. And I will say, working with and being on the board of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, and the members, over, I think, almost 300 members that we have of developers, property management companies, and all of our other partners to help us produce affordable housing, we're all, for the most part, socially conscious. So in Maryland, I think we really are very lucky to have the development companies that we do here in the state. But on the other side of this, there are some residents who aren't paying their rent, and they've not been, affected by COVID, because they're like, oh no, I'm not going to get evicted. Some residents are coming in and providing the paperwork necessary to let us know, look, I can only pay you $250 this month. That's all I have. And we appreciate that, and we understand which families are having issues. The Penrose Foundation raised almost over $50,000, the last figure I got, so that we're actually helping those families through our support services staff to get them food and essential supplies that they need, delivering food to our senior citizens and our persons with disabilities populations that can't get out or can't get out safely to get those types of things. So, that's about how we are dealing with things currently in this pandemic. You asked earlier about what are rent collections like. So Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition's members have reported the following figures. For the month of April, our senior buildings collected approximately 93% of the rents. And our family projects collected about 84.6% of the rents. These numbers were actually much better than we anticipated they would be. However, in May, as of, I think, yesterday, our senior properties, our collections went down to 89.5. And, we estimate that they probably have family members who have been helping them with their expenses and are being affected as it relates to COVID. From the family perspective, rent collections have gone down to 73% from 84.6%.
That's scary for those folks. And I mean, it's what, it's what we said earlier, right? If you can't pay your rent and your landlord can't pay their mortgage and eventually they lose their house, that's not good for anybody. And of course you have larger developments than that, but it's
scary
for a renter, to not be able to pay.
Yes. So let's talk about construction was considered by Governor Hogan as an essential service. So construction projects of affordable housing developments are continuing. Fortunately, through the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, we have a construction committee, and we've got most of the major GCs who are building affordable housing across the state are involved. And, they've reported, experiencing shortage of skilled staff laborers, due to some folks just don't want to put their families at risk.
Sure.
Work. Others may have contracted COVID. So there is a shortage of skilled laborers. Construction schedules are being delayed as a result of the safety protocols that our general contractors are putting into place to make sure that the workers and the subcontractors are working in a safe environment. And then there's also been some material shortages, where states weren't, like for instance, in Pennsylvania, construction for a while wasn't considered essential. And there's some supplies that we may get from Pennsylvania suppliers. So what all this means is, at the end of the day, these projects are costing more than what we anticipated they would cost. Which is concerning and is a financial problem.
I'm going to ask you one question about that, and I'd love to get your feedback on that, and also maybe from the county exec or Dan or others. So if you see your project costs going up now, I'm interested in this from a, how do we develop and add, additional affordable housing? I worked on a couple of years ago requiring DHCD to do a needs assessment for affordable housing in the state, and that is ongoing now, and they're going to be doing that. But I wonder if costs are going up, like you're saying, what does that mean in the long term? Are we looking at not just a crisis right now for renters, but a longer term problem because of increased costs right now? Or do you see that do you see the increased costs going away and this problem going away when things open up again and we have a vaccine? Or do you see this happening long term?
It's going to be a long-term effect.
Okay.
I've not experienced in my years of development any time by which construction costs went down.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So you think they're going up and they're going to stay up?
Yeah. And they're going to increase. And it's not just from the construction side, it's also from the financing side.
Right.
Banks are increasing their rates. For instance, for construction loans, some are requiring additional construction interest reserves.
Right.
To, stave against, not knowing what the economy is going to be in 4 months or 6 months.
Right.
Equity investors, and I'm getting a little bit off topic here, so I'm going to go back and get back to that question because I've got a number of things that are affecting and will affect the cost to do affordable housing. I do want to say Maryland CDA and Secretary Holt and his staff are closing deals. Projects are still moving, which is great. And they are doing what they can to make sure that these projects get to the closing table. MAHC, we meet with them on a biweekly basis with the Secretary's executive staff. We too are pushing for a statewide rental supplement program. It is needed from our perspective and our members' perspective.
And just for folks who don't know, that's the Maryland Affordable Housing. You're talking about the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition is pushing for rental support. I think there was a question about that. Also, I believe MMHA, Maryland Multifamily Housing Association, has also been advocating for rental support. So this is something that it seems like landlords, builders, renter advocates, tenant advocates are all on the same side for. So, it's something I hope that we'll see DHCD and the governor act on.
Yes, we desperately need it. CDA is looking at projects on an individual basis that may be having some issues and have reserves out there that can be tapped to help in the short term. Also, from a short-term perspective, they've allowed owners to not pay cash flow payments for the loans that they've committed to certain projects. So that's helped, but that's only a short-term problem. Short-term solution. So where do we go from here? The affordable housing industry relies heavily on the 9% low-income housing tax credit.
Right.
And that housing credit, each state gets a certain allocation based on its population. And so every year, Maryland CDA has a 9% round, and 50 different projects are submitted to compete against each other, and maybe a third gets funded. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that Congress has been looking at, the House of Representatives, is allocating 25% more of the 9% low-income housing tax credit over the next 2 years to assist in what we all expect is going to be higher need for affordable housing across the country. That's not happened yet. The other major issue that is being discussed, and we've been trying to get this approved for quite a long time, is fixing the 4% low-income housing tax credit.
Right, right.
And so for you, those who don't know, every month they come out with what that 4% tax credit should be. So give you an example, in March or February, the rate was 3.17. They are showing for June, it's going to be 3.06.
Right.
And what that does, it severely affects the amount of tax credit equity that we can use to finance affordable housing projects.
Right. So I want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions.
Sure.
So there were a few questions, and County Executive, I'll turn it over to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit on this sort of how do we think past COVID? I mean, we obviously we have to keep advocating right now, right here on rental support and rental assistance for people. But looking down the road, what are you thinking of in terms of supporting renters, supporting the development of affordable housing, at a local level? I'm curious, what your administration is thinking about, and maybe this has sort of made it even more urgent or made it more difficult. I'm not sure, but.
Well, it unfortunately slowed things down on the legislative front at the county level.
Yeah.
We came in with 4 pieces of housing legislation we wanted to do at the beginning of a year and a half ago. And we got our fair housing bill. We got our workforce housing bill done, which helps a little bit, not much. And we still want to do our MPDU, moderately priced dwelling units, so that new development has a percentage of units that are affordable. We've not done that. Most of the region has. And in Anne Arundel County, we would have had a lot more units built that were affordable, somewhat affordable, had we had that. And then creating a trust fund. And maybe this CARES money and the money that we're putting in now will give us some momentum to continue that work. I think a part of the problem in our county, and I think everywhere, is convincing the public that it's a good investment of their tax dollars to help with, to subsidize housing. Right. And in my county, there's the issue that a lot of people don't think there should be any development. They want to maintain green space. They want to maintain open space. And I do too. But we need to get people thinking about transit-oriented development and mixed use and higher density in some places so that we can protect other places. And so there's a whole political battle around these issues as well. And some of it is racism and classism and I got mine, I don't want you to have yours. But some of it is that nobody's really explained to people a way to make it work where everybody, comes together. I hate talking about helping subsidizing affordable housing without talking about income. Yeah. And we have a movement going on right now, even of people saying that we should pause our progress towards a $50 minimum wage because of the economy. And that's just insane in my view, that if the lowest income people don't have enough money to pay their rent, any rent, much less get food and all the other things in healthcare, we got a real problem. So my hope is that part of the effect of the coronavirus is that people do start to come together. We're all working together on fighting the virus. We all see that we're setting up food distribution systems, that people who've been living paycheck to paycheck, it just doesn't work. So the next problem we have, pandemic, economic downturn, is going to be putting people on the streets. And that's just, I think most people don't want to live in a country or a county or a state like that. And so my hope is that we get the political will to be able to do all these complicated things on the policy front.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And, one of the things that's so interesting is, many of our frontline workers are some of these lowest paid employees who, Ivy, some of them, like you said, they're living in your complexes and the housing that these developers are building. And yet, they make many of them live paycheck to paycheck. And there was I saw somewhere somebody comment about, if American Airlines and these huge corporations can't last a couple months without a government loan or a government handout, how can we expect a family to, right? We have to be a little more consistent in what we're expecting from people. So
Delegate Lehrman, can I, I don't know if you have any more for me, but I have 90 pastors waiting on the Zoom call to talk about reopening churures. So
go talk to your pastors, I don't want to stand between you and men and women of God. So thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. And so maybe Dan and Sharice and Ivy, I'll turn a couple questions over to you. let's see. So there are a couple of questions about, thoughts on ideas like permanently supportive housing, use of hotels for bridging the housing gap, where and what quality, and how do we keep people housed who are and not evicted. Any thoughts on any of those? We have some people who've been writing in.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Therese.
No, one of the things we touched on, right? There needs to be more rental assistance, period. Before COVID, at least in Baltimore, the wages do not match the rental amount. The average rent is $1,200 a month, and the average worker is making $9, $10 an hour. That doesn't match. The burden falls heaviest on women and women of color here in Baltimore. We do need, like Ivy said, like Dan said, like the county exec said, we do need more affordable housing, but also we need a better infrastructure for rental assistance. Even the existing rental assistance programs, they have lots of barriers. So in a situation like now, if you were just laid off temporarily, technically you may not have an income temporarily, just for a month or 2 months. In Baltimore City, in the normal rental assistance, you wouldn't be able to get help. You wouldn't be able to get a one-time assistance to get you over that bridge. We need to make it a smoother transition. We need, like I said, right to counsel. But again, we need more assistance on rental assistance and affordable housing to keep people stable. Once they're evicted, it costs more for them, for the state, for the city, and it's not stable.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
But it's more, the money that's coming down through the CARES Act to the state and to the municipalities, that's going to run out soon. That is not an ongoing stream of income.
It's gone. Yeah.
And so Congress really needs to act to make sure that there are funds that can really expand the rental assistance program to help us ongoing, and that will also assist in producing more affordable housing units in the future.
Yep. There is a great question, and I might, I see Barbara Samuel's question about, does anyone know how the governor plans to spend the $1.3 million in coronavirus relief funds allocated to state government, if not spending some of it on rental assistance? And I don't know yet. We have not had a full report. I expect there to be more information coming out soon on where that money is all going. And I know the joint task force overseeing it, 1.3 billion. The joint task force is meeting every Wednesday to talk through some of where that is going. But we have not had a full report yet on how that money is being spent. Although I do hope that it comes soon. And of course, next June 3rd is our next Board of Public Works meeting. And at the BPW meetings, they often have these discussions on where money is being sent as well. There's also a question, and this might be a good place. I want to be respectful of people's time. We try to wrap these up in an hour. So maybe this is a good last word from folks. Are there efforts to change the definition of affordable? Most of my clients who are living off of public benefits cannot afford affordable housing. And I think this, this might just be a good, affordable can mean anything from, 10% AMI or, to 80% AMI if you're a low income housing tax credit recipient. So, but maybe if you could just say a couple last words about, what you see in terms of making affordable housing truly affordable and what the role is for government in how government and business have to work together to make that happen. And then we'll sign off. Dan, do you want to start?
I could start off. One thing, we've been talking about the $1.3 billion in coronavirus relief funds, but there's actually also $16 million in CDBG funds that the state has gotten. Usually the state just allocates to smaller jurisdictions, but this is for statewide. So there also is a question. We're talking with them about ideas for how to use that. But I guess the last thing I'd like to say is that maybe this moment can help us think differently and maybe a little bigger about addressing things like this. As the county executive said, really, it's a matter of having the will. It's a matter of public support for this. And we in the pandemic, all of a sudden, congregate homeless shelters were terrible. And so we figured out a way to put people in hotels. So it's when something feels necessary, we can get it done. And so maybe this moment can help us think like that a little.
Yep, well said. Charisse?
I muted myself twice. Like Baltimore City has the trust fund, the housing trust fund. These type of things that help it so that these are community-based housing, and how the money is spent and what is built is based on the community need. Rent stabilization is another. We do need, like Dan said, we need to start thinking out of the box and changing what things mean. And if there's the will, apparently there is the money, right? We saw a lot of money being produced on the federal end when they needed to find it. So yeah, things like that.
Yep, thanks. And Ivy?
To close it out, you know, we're living in a new normal, and our past normal isn't going to be the future normal. And so I agree with the other panelists that government and local municipalities and the state are going to have to find ways to adjust to our new normal. And people who were formerly working are no longer going to be working and are going to be homeless, and our children are going to be affected, and crime is going to increase. I mean, there are a lot of effects that go along with not having sufficient affordable housing in our community. So pretty important.
It is. I think it is the baseline, and I want to make sure everybody has our contact information. So feel free to be in touch. Thanks everybody so much for joining me today. This was a really fascinating discussion. Now, the first of many. I know we don't have all the answers right now, but we certainly laid out some of the challenges and ideas. So thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you.
everybody, and keep in touch, stay safe, stay healthy, and wear your masks. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.